With my sister's wedding 2 weeks away now, I realized there's just no way I was going to be able to get everything done on the deck done in time. But I thought I could still get enough done so people could go up there and safely do whatever it is people do on decks. I guess just mainly stand around and enjoy the view. This mainly entailed getting the cables up in the middle of the railings. I tried a couple different configurations for the cables. I decided I didn't want to drill through the 4x4 metal posts and run the cables all the way around the deck, just so water didn't get in the post, and I thought it'd be a harsh corner for the cables to bend around. I also decided not to just terminate each cable on the left side and the right side, because the stainless steel fasteners are really expensive. It was the biggest cost on this project, actually. What I ended up settling on was zigzagging the cables down each side so they'll just be fastened up top and then down at the bottom. This seemed like the best choice because I was only going to need 6 fasteners for the whole deck, and I didn't have to go through the corner posts. But now I needed to design some cable runners to route the cables in this design. This sounded like a fun challenge, and I thought it'd be a good project for the new CNC table. I wanted to give the ends a gradual curve, which would be easier on the cable, and I felt like it would keep it from fraying over time. So the lines I drew represent the center of the cable, and I needed to find the inside of the cable. So I drew some guidelines, half the width of the cable inward, to represent where the inside of the cable will be. I used the Bezier tool to draw a couple tapered curves that I liked, and then I could bring this edge inward to make this a solid piece. And I ended up coming up with this shape that'll be the inner insert that will guide the cable back around to the other side. The cable is 3/16, so I thought I would cut this out of 1/4 inch metal, which would give it just a little bit of wiggle room inside. Now that I had the inner inserts done, I needed to design a couple pieces that'll sandwich them and hold them in place at the right distance from each other. These outer pieces also need to keep the cable from slipping off the inner insert, so they need to be a little bit wider and protrude past it. So I reused the same curves and just extended it out a 1/4 inch, and then the inner curve I just kept the same, so it'll be flush. I gave it a couple more curves to enclose the shape into one piece, and then after some cleanup, I had this shape. When I started designing this, I had a lot of trouble because I was thinking way too much about what it should look like instead of what it needed to do. I always really struggle when I'm staring at a blank sheet and my mind kind of goes in a million directions. I lost a lot of time on some really bad designs. But then I started over and I forced myself to focus on what the essential purpose of this project is. In this case, it's basically just that inner curve to redirect the cable. Once I had that single curve drawn, the form and the shape fell into place pretty quickly and easily. For me, and how my brain works, the form always follows function. After adding some more curves that'll give me places to weld the brackets to the metal posts, I was pretty happy with the shape it was taking. I opened them in a new SketchUp file and broke apart the sides so I could export them as a DXF file, which is what SheetCam uses to create the G-code for my CNC plasma table. In SheetCam, you specify the cut order and inner and outer offsets and that sort of thing. And it shows the path that the table will make as it cuts. Alright, let's finally get to work cutting these things out. I always get so excited to jump in and start fabricating things once I get my design figured out. I think it's the best part once you know exactly what you want to make. And I just love jumping in and working on something, taking a rendering to something real right in front of you. A couple times now I've had the slag from the initial pierce through these thicker pieces of plate knock the torch off as it comes back around to finish the cut. And so I usually just stand real close and chip the slag off as I can. And it hasn't really been an issue since doing that. These outer longer pieces are out of 3/16 inch steel. I didn't feel the need to make them the same thickness as the inner pieces. After all the pieces were cut, I gathered it all up and hauled it up to our farm shop, where I got to work cleaning up the edges. This was the part I was really looking forward to, bolting them together for the first time. I'm only placing the inner inserts on every other loop, but I just made it all match for symmetry's sake. I even put bolt holes on the loops that won't be used, just for the heck of it. They fit together great. Oops. I needed to drill a 5/8 inch hole for the cable fasteners to sit recessed in, which is why I left these ends long on one side of the brackets. I heated them up and then I could flare them out a little bit. And then I found some 3/4 inch square rod, which is the distance I wanted to space them, and tapped it into place, bent the hot metal back around it so I knew it would be the right distance apart, and nice and square to the rest of the bracket. Tapping the square bar down just a little bit let me heat up this top piece that protruded and bend it over on top of the opposite side. Some tacks across the side, hold them together, and then I cleaned them up with the angle grinder. After drilling the right size hole for the fastener and giving them a couple coats of paint, they were ready to be mounted. On the two fasteners that are getting mounted to the barn, I also welded some tabs on the backside that I can sink some leg screws through. I drove them in most of the way with my impact driver and then finished them off by hand. I needed to remove the paint before I could weld them on the middle posts. I went ahead and welded them in place. Drake, did you turn off my gas again? I'm pretty sure he's always turning off the gas when I'm not looking. There's no way I would forget that often to turn it on. I really need to be careful to get the two sides opposite of each other. The mounting bracket goes on the top on one side and the bottom on the other. I was sure I was going to have to cut one off and re-weld it, but luckily I didn't have to. It's kind of a drizzly day, so I hurried up and gave him a coat of paint before the bare metal got wet. Once they had a couple days to dry, it was cable time. I went with 3/16 inch stainless cable. The stainless cable is much more expensive than galvanized, but it seems like it's pretty much necessary since these are exterior railings and going to be exposed to a lot of weather here in Oregon. I think the stainless cable is a big step up in looks though too from the other stuff. Looks really nice. I drilled these holes 1/32 bigger than the cable size, which is, give me a second to do the math, 7/32. I didn't want to drill a 1/4 inch because if the cable's loose in there, it really kind of rattles around and makes a lot of noise when you walk on the deck. I learned this on my inside railings. I was worried it was going to be too tight of a fit and be a real pain to get run through the holes, but with a little bit of patience, it wasn't too bad. I also thought I was going to be a pain feeding the cable around the bends in the brackets that I just made, but it was stiff enough that it kind of just fed around and wasn't a problem at all. These fasteners are really cool. You just stick the end in and it pinches it and supposedly never comes out. The harder you pull, the harder it tightens down. I gave it a good tug and I couldn't budge it. The problem with these fasteners though is that you only get one chance to get the length right. I was really nervous about this, especially considering how expensive these things were. I was told that if you wrap the cable with some kind of tape, it really helps keep the cable from fraying as you cut it. I used electrical tape and it worked really well. Cut the cable once, leaving about 1 foot extra of length.
Burrito.
But then I got a surprise visit from the parents, dropping off a much needed burrito.
That hurt your knees?
Yeah. That's nice. Thank you. Working out the way you hoped? Yeah, good.
I thought it was going to be a lot harder to pull it all through, but it's kind of stiff enough that it just kind of feeds around the corners. All filled up now, I was ready to tackle the anxiety-inducing final cut. I pulled as much of the slack out as I could and set the fastener to as loose as it would go. Just a couple threads screwed in, and then I went ahead and cut it. It seemed pretty close, but I wasn't sure how much slack I was going to be able to pull out by tightening the fastener down. The cable was really tight by the time the fastener was tightened all the way down, but I'm a little nervous the cable might stretch a little bit over time. I might have to put one of the tightening fasteners on the other end to take out some slack down the road. I really enjoyed this process of putting the cables up. Even though it's just thin cables, it still really went a long ways to enclosing the deck and making it feel like a self-contained space. Didn't quite get the vertigo I used to get standing on the edge of the deck. And as is usually the case, by the time I'm doing the last one, I figured out a pretty good process for doing it. If I just pull outward on each of the cables and walk the slack up, you can really take a lot of it out. And the cables are really tight by the time you've done this a couple times. The vice grips were also indispensable in doing this. Drake sure wasn't going to help. The last little thing I wanted to try to squeeze in before the wedding was to put up some hanging lights. I've used these lights a couple times now on different projects, and I really like to put up cable first because the lights seem like they hang off it nice and evenly, and the tension and weight of the lights just gets transferred through the cable. Once I get the roof up over the deck, I'm going to rehang these lights so it runs up along the rafters to the peak. That's why I put this electrical outlet up top here. It's tied to the same switch that runs the lanterns. Got a little help from my dad putting these up, which was much appreciated. And that was it. The deck was ready for the wedding. While I didn't get the deck completely finished in time, I was still so happy to get it in a state where people could come up here and check it out. With the railings done, it was a lot safer for myself, for Drake, for younger kids on crutches, and definitely safer for all the wedding attendees who Might have had a glass of champagne. Or two.